Give Liam your credit card, or you can hit the road. We ain't your charity, Dad. My daughter, Chloe's words sliced through the air. Then the coffee mug tilted. Hot coffee splashed all over my lap, burning straight through my thin pants and biting into my skin. The cups smashed on the tile floor, bits of shattered ceramic flying everywhere like broken teeth. Chloe stood there with her arms crossed. Her voice was flat, like she'd rehearsed this whole speech, like she was just reading some work rules. I just stared at the dark stain on my pants, with steam rising up and the bitter smell in the air, and all those little pieces of what used to be a whole cup scattered at my feet. I didn't move right away. The burn was sharp, but the words were sharper. Then came the silence. A silence that told me I was nothing to my own daughter anymore. For that second, I wasn't her dad. I was just some old guy to be burned and tossed out. But what she thought was me giving up was something else entirely. 'Cause in that quiet moment, I made a promise to myself. This wasn't going to be settled with cash. She was going to find out just how much it costs to be so full of contempt. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from. Chloe was the first one to turn away, and that cut deeper than the coffee ever could. No flinch, no gasp, no hint of feeling bad. She just walked to the sink and rinsed her hands, as if she'd just splashed a little bit of dishwater. Dad, don't make this a bigger deal than it needs to be, she said without even looking at me. Liam really needs this. You've got all this money just sitting there. What's the point if you won't even help your own family? The word family came out of her mouth so easily, it felt wrong to hear it. Liam was sitting across from me, slouched down in his chair, with his face lit up by his phone screen. He didn't even bother to pretend like he cared. At just 16 years old, he was already a pro at acting like he deserved everything. He wanted $6,000 for some gaming setup. He said it like it was his right, not something he was asking for. And Chloe, my own daughter, was backing him up like his lawyer. I just dabbed at my lap with a napkin. The burn stung, but it was nothing compared to the pain spreading through my chest. I'd seen fire before, the real kind. 30 years as a firefighter taught me what real heat could do to a person's skin, to their homes, to their whole life. But this little bit of nastiness burned hotter than any fire I'd ever fought. I'm not giving him my credit card, Chloe, I said, real quiet like. My voice was steady, but it felt like every word was scraping my throat raw. She turned around, her arms still crossed, and a sneer on her face that I didn't recognize from the girl I raised. You're lucky we even let you stay here after your surgery, she said. You couldn't even walk without me. Don't you remember me taking care of everything for you? Your bills, your pills, your food. And now you're going to lecture me about money? Her words came out sharp and fast, like she'd been getting ready for this fight. I just let them hit me. Each one felt like a boot kicking me in the chest. But I didn't get up. I didn't fight back. My silence just seemed to get her angrier. You can either hand over the card, she said, leaning against the counter like a judge giving a sentence, or you'll be out of here by the end of the day. That's final. The burn on my legs was throbbing, but I stood up anyway. I got up slowly, on purpose, straightened my back, and looked her right in the eye. I'll be gone before the sun goes down, I said. Her sneer dropped for half a second. She thought I'd beg. She thought I'd feel guilty. She thought I'd fall apart. Instead, I gave her a promise. And you can't cancel a promise like you can a credit card. I just turned and walked away. My steps were slow and heavy, with each one dragging a piece of my old life behind me. The hallway to the guest room felt longer than it used to. All the family photos on the wall seemed to be watching me with their lifeless, glassy eyes. There was Chloe, 6 years old, with her missing front tooth, holding up a stuffed bunny. There was her mother, Sarah, who's been gone for 15 years now, smiling in the sunlight that we thought would last forever. I stopped in front of one picture, Chloe on her college graduation day. I was standing next to her, with my arm around her shoulders, my face so proud and hers just glowing with the future. I thought I'd done a good job with her. I thought my sacrifices meant something. But the woman in the kitchen wasn't the girl in that photo. Somewhere between that smiling picture and the hot coffee on my lap, she had changed. Or maybe I was just too blind to see it. In the guest room, the air was stale, with a faint smell of cleaning stuff and laundry soap. My suitcase was sitting in the closet, a little dusty, but ready. I pulled it down, and the weight surprised me. My hip hurt from the effort, but pain was something I knew. Pain was something I could handle. I opened the nightstand drawer and pulled out a small envelope I'd hidden there months ago. Inside were copies of my birth certificate, insurance cards, and a piece of paper with my bank's routing number written in my shaky handwriting. Back then, I didn't know why I hid them there. Now I do. Some part of me had always known this day was coming. I sat on the edge of the bed, with the suitcase at my feet. My hands were shaking, not cause I was weak, but cause I was seeing things so clearly. From the living room, I could hear the television come on, some trashy reality show Chloe liked. Laughter filled the house, but it wasn't for me. She never knocked on the door. Liam never asked if I was okay. They'd made their point. I folded each shirt carefully, one after the other, like I was packing for a trip I'd already planned. My mind drifted back to the years I'd spent in this very room, getting better after my hip surgery. Chloe had brought me tea then, tucked a blanket around my legs, and told me I could stay as long as I needed to. I was grateful, foolishly grateful, but her kindness had strings attached. You couldn't see them at first, but then they started getting tighter until they cut. What she called help was really just control. What she called support was a cage. As I was packing, I found a little leather pouch in the back of the drawer. Inside was a pearl ring, the one my late wife used to wear. I hadn't looked at it in years. I held it in my hand, feeling the smooth surface and remembering how warm her hand felt. "Sarah," I whispered, even though there was nobody there to hear me. "You'd know what to do." A tear almost came out, but I held it back. Tears weren't going to help me now. Determination would. A soft knock came from the front door. Not from my room. I heard voices. Chloe's sharp tone, greeting a delivery guy. Packages showing up. Life goes on. She never even called my name. I zipped the suitcase shut. The sound was final, like a door closing. I looked again at the graduation picture on the dresser. My smile in that photo was big and proud. I wasn't proud now. I was just awake. Being quiet doesn't mean you're weak. Being silent doesn't mean you've given up. I stood up, steadying myself on the dresser. The weight in my chest changed from sadness to steel. They thought I'd beg. They thought I'd hold on. They thought I'd cave. They were dead wrong. As I picked up the suitcase, I saw something under the bed. An old notebook where I used to write down grocery lists. I pulled it out and wiped the dust off it. On the last page were numbers, my account numbers. I stared at them, and my pulse got steady again. Chloe took the credit card. She thought she took everything, but she forgot to take this. I slipped the notebook into my pocket. The sun was going down outside the window, casting long shadows across the floor. I put the suitcase by the door, with my jacket neatly over the handle. By the time the light was gone, I would be, too. Not broken, not thrown out, just gone. And somewhere, somehow, Chloe and Liam would find out that disrespect always comes with a price. I sat on the edge of the bed, with the suitcase by the door, and my eyes landed on that graduation photo that had been on the dresser for years. Chloe and me, standing side by side, her face bright with youth and big dreams, and mine looking tired but proud. That moment was supposed to be a turning point, the day I believed all the hard work I put in had finally paid off. I picked up the frame, the glass cold against my fingers, and for a few seconds, I just stared. The woman who poured coffee on me tonight wasn't the same young woman in this photo. That hopeful smile belonged to someone else, someone I used to know. The smell of burnt coffee was still on my pants, but holding that frame, I could almost pretend I was smelling something else, like fresh spring air, or cut grass, or the light smell of my late wife, Sarah, hugging Chloe after the ceremony. For a moment, I was back there, in a big stadium full of people, standing tall as my daughter walked across the stage. Back then, I thought the hardest times were behind us. When Sarah passed away, Chloe was barely 14. I was left with a teenager who was full of pain and questions I didn't know how to answer. I had been a firefighter for over 20 years by then, trained to run into burning buildings without a second thought. But raising a grieving daughter by myself, that was a fire no training could prepare me for. I did the best I could. I worked double shifts and still tried to make it to every recital, every game, every parent-teacher meeting. I made dinners out of boxes, burned more than I cooked, and taped her school projects together on the kitchen table after midnight. I'll never forget the time she needed to make a model volcano for science class. I'd forgotten all about it during a crazy week at the firehouse. She found me asleep on the couch, with soot still on my uniform, and my hands all cracked from the smoke. She shook me awake, her voice small but strong. "Dad, it's okay. We can make another one. You'll help me." That's what dads do. Her trust back then was so pure it almost made me cry. She didn't care about the volcano. She cared that I was there. I think about that a lot now, 'cause somewhere along the way, that kind of trust changed. It became something colder. Through high school, she was always with me. She'd wave to me from the basketball court, always looking to make sure I was in the stands. She leaned on me for advice, even if all I had to offer was a tired smile. College was the first time I felt her getting away from me. She called less and only came home on holidays. I just told myself it was her growing up, becoming independent. That's a good thing, right? We raise our kids so they can leave one day and make their own way. That's what I told myself when she forgot my birthday one year, or when she missed Thanksgiving 'cause of work. But when I did see her, I noticed something was different. Her eyes would look around the room, restless, like she was already trying to figure out what needed fixing or what needed to be controlled. I just brushed it off. She's just stressed, I told myself. She'll come back around. The day she graduated from college, I believed all that distance was worth it. Standing next to her for that photo, I felt Sarah's absence and her presence all at once. I thought, we did it. She's ready for her future. I had no idea that her future would one day be built on making my life smaller. The first small signs started showing up after I retired. I had my pension, my savings, and the house Sarah and I bought together. Chloe started offering to help. Dad, let me take care of your bills online. It'll be easier, less paperwork. Dad, I'll get the food. You don't have to push yourself. Dad, you shouldn't bother with the neighbors. You get tired too fast. It sounded like she cared. And at first, I was happy about it. After years of giving, it felt good to have someone take care of me. But little by little, the world around me got smaller. The mailbox I used to open myself stayed empty. Calls from old friends stopped reaching me. Even the local bridge club where I played on Thursday nights stopped inviting me because, as I found out later, Chloe told them I was too tired to play. I told myself it was only for a little while, that she was just helping me get better after my hip surgery, that she was busy and trying to handle everything. But the real reason was tougher to swallow. She was handling me. One night about 3 years ago, she came home late from work. I was waiting in the living room, just like I used to when she was a teenager sneaking back in after curfew. Old habits die hard, I said. You don't have to wait up for me, Dad, she said, kicking off her shoes, her voice a little sharper than I expected. I laughed, just making sure you got home safe. She sighed. Safe, Dad? I'm 32 years old. I don't need a chaperone. That hurt more than I let on. She went to bed without another word, and I sat there long after the lights were out, staring at the quiet house. That was the first time I felt like maybe I had stayed too long in her life. But I didn't do anything about it, because fathers don't give up. Fathers stay, even when the door is slowly closing. The signs got more obvious over the years. The way she'd roll her eyes when I asked about her job. The way she'd brush off my advice with a flat, "You wouldn't understand." The way she'd wince whenever money came up, as if me asking about my own accounts was some kind of accusation. One night, I heard her on the phone with a friend. He doesn't even look at his bank statements anymore, she laughed. I take care of all of that. Honestly, it's just easier this way. The laugh hit me hard, not because she was lying, but because she was telling the truth. I hadn't seen a bank statement in months. I had let her convince me I didn't need to. Looking back now, I get it. The coffee on my lap tonight wasn't the start of anything. It was the end of a long, slow erasing, and I let it happen. I turned the graduation photo in my hands, watching the lamp light shimmer on the glass. The smile on her face in that picture used to mean everything to me. I built my life around keeping that smile safe. But that smile had changed over the years, gotten hard. It was the same smirk she had tonight in the kitchen, with her arms crossed and her voice flat, saying I was either a credit card or a problem. That's what really broke me. Not the burn on my skin, not the coffee on my pants, but realizing that somewhere between that photo and tonight, I'd lost my daughter. Or maybe she had lost herself. A car horn outside snapped me back to the present. The photo slipped from my hand and hit the dresser with a sharp crack. I stared at the spiderweb of a crack now running through the glass. Perfect. Another crack. Another reminder that things that were once whole don't always stay that way. I put the photo face down. I didn't want to see that smile anymore. I opened the nightstand drawer and pulled out the old notebook where I used to write down grocery lists. I flipped through the pages, bread, batteries, until I got to the last one. Numbers. Account numbers I'd written down months ago, just in case. I don't know why I wrote them back then. Maybe some part of me knew this day would come, that the silence wasn't safety, it was a trap. Chloe thought she'd taken over everything. She thought she'd left me with nothing. But she didn't think to take this. I slid the notebook into my jacket pocket. It felt small but heavy, like a piece of coal waiting to catch fire. I looked around the room one last time, at the walls I had stared at while I was getting better from surgery. The bed where I had laid, so thankful for her help. The closet where I had kept my life in a suitcase, just for a little while. Nothing about it had been for a little while. It had been a slow takeover of my freedom, my self-respect, of me. But not anymore. The TV was on faintly in the living room. Chloe's voice drifted in, laughing at something on the screen. I listened to it the same way I used to listen for her breathing when she was a kid, asleep in her room. Only now, it was a stranger's laugh. I picked up my suitcase, set it by the door, and took a deep breath. Quiet doesn't mean you're weak. Silence doesn't mean you've given up. I wasn't broken. I wasn't thrown out. I was just getting started. I sat at the desk in the guest room long after the house had gotten quiet. My suitcase was already packed, leaning against the door, but my eyes kept going back to the old notebook I had slipped into my jacket pocket. That notebook was nothing special. It had a cheap cover, bent corners, and was half full of grocery lists and notes. But on the last page, the one I had almost ripped out months ago, there were numbers, my account numbers written in my shaky handwriting. I don't remember exactly why I wrote them down. Maybe it was a habit, maybe I was just being paranoid, maybe it was something deeper. Maybe a part of me had known this day was coming. I pulled the old laptop out from under the bed. It was dusty, heavier than I remembered, and when I opened it, the hinges groaned like old, creaky bones. I hadn't touched the thing in a year, maybe more. Chloe told me there was no point. "You'll just get confused, Dad," she said once, taking it out of my hands when I tried to check my email. "I'll handle it. You just rest." Back then, I let her. Tonight, I wasn't resting. Tonight, I needed to know the truth. The laptop took its time to start up, but when the screen finally lit up, I felt a weird sense of relief, like an old friend had woken up from a long sleep. I tried the first password I could think of, Sarah's birthday. Nope. I tried our anniversary. No again. My hands were just hovering over the keyboard. Useless. For a second, I thought, maybe Chloe was right. Maybe I shouldn't even try. Then I remembered the Bible on the shelf. I pulled it down, flipped through its worn pages, and sure enough, a faded yellow sticky note fell out. My own handwriting was staring back at me, the password I had scribbled there a long time ago. I typed it in carefully. The screen blinked. Then suddenly I was in my account, my name right there. It's hard to explain what that felt like. For months I had felt like I didn't exist, like I was just a number, like a bill to be paid. But there it was, my name on the screen, proof that I was still real, that I still had a place in the world that wasn't being controlled by my daughter. The relief didn't last. My eyes went down the page, scanning the charges, and each line felt like a punch to the gut. Charges I didn't recognize. Hundreds of dollars at online stores. Late-night food deliveries I never ordered. Streaming services piled on top of each other, most of which I'd never even heard of. And then the video game charges, thousands of dollars spread out over weeks and months. Money slowly being drained from my pension. The most recent one was yesterday, $600 at an electronics store. Liam. I leaned back in the chair, holding the arms until my knuckles were white. The coffee burn on my thighs throbbed, as if to remind me this wasn't new. This wasn't something that just happened. This is who they had become. Chloe didn't just snap tonight. She had been working toward this, little by little, until the day she didn't have to ask me anymore. I printed out the statements one by one. The old printer coughed and sputtered out sheets that felt light but were so heavy with truth. I stacked them carefully, making a neat pile. They weren't just paper. They were proof. Proof that my silence was mistaken for giving up. Proof that my trust was turned into a chance to steal from me. And then I saw it. Buried between all the withdrawals. One line was glowing like a hot coal. A deposit. A payment from the firefighters' union. My disability fund. It hadn't been touched. Somehow she had missed it. Maybe she didn't know it was there. Maybe she didn't care because the amount was small compared to the pension. Whatever the reason, it was mine. Untouched, still there. I felt my chest get bigger, with air filling up spaces I hadn't even realized were empty. She hadn't taken everything. She thought she had, but she hadn't. There was still a crack in her plan, and through it, I could breathe. I looked at the pile of papers, the notebook, and the glowing screen. I wasn't just an old man with a suitcase anymore. I was a man with proof, and proof changes everything. My phone was on the nightstand. I scrolled through my contacts. Most of them were names from another life, guys who were gone or had moved away, brothers from the firehouse who were now just memories. But there was one name that hadn't faded. Ben. He used to live 2 houses down from me. We used to share beers on the porch after long shifts, back when our knees worked and our wives still laughed at our bad jokes. He became a lawyer after he retired, handled wills and small arguments. Nothing fancy, but he was good and honest. I hadn't talked to him in months. Chloe had been answering my calls, running interference, deciding who I needed to talk to. Maybe she figured I'd forget about him. I pressed the call button. The line connected, and his voice came through, low, steady, and familiar. George, everything all right? For a second, I couldn't speak. I swallowed hard. Not exactly, I said. But it will be. I need your help. There was no pause, just a cough. And then he said, tell me where you are. I'll be there. I hung up the phone and sat in the dim light, with the folder of statements in front of me. Proof, small, but enough to get started. From the living room, I could hear a faint laugh. Chloe's voice. Liam's was deeper now, cracking with that teenage arrogance. They thought I was silent, defeated, and ready to give up. They thought the suitcase meant I was leaving, not that I was ready to fight. I slid the folder into the suitcase and zipped it shut. The sound was final and clear. Proof doesn't need to yell. It just needs to be there. I glanced at the graduation photo again, still face down on the dresser. For years, I had seen pride in her smile. Now I saw something else. Ambition, a coldness, maybe even a hunger, the kind that preys not on strangers, but on your own family. There was a knock at the front door, soft but firm. My chest tightened, then relaxed as I heard his voice. It's me, George. I stood up, picked up the suitcase, and put the notebook in my jacket pocket. The lamp flickered as I turned it off, and the room went dark. The hallway stretched out long, lined with pictures that didn't feel like they belonged to me anymore. Chloe at 6 with her stuffed bunny. Chloe at 12 in her soccer uniform. Chloe at 22 in her cap and gown. Each one seemed to be watching me as I walked by, not with warmth, but with an accusation, as if asking me why I hadn't seen this coming. I got to the door and opened it quietly. There was Ben, with his navy jacket zipped up against the cool night air, his eyes sharp but kind. He looked at the suitcase, then at me. You ready? He asked. I just nodded. Behind me, the house was glowing with a warm, fake light spilling through the windows onto the dark lawn. In front of me, the night stretched wide, uncertain but open. I stepped out, the suitcase handle firm in my grip, the folder under my arm. The door shut softly behind me. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like it was suffocating me. It was mine. Chloe thought tonight was the end of me. She thought the coffee, the words, the warning would break me. But she was wrong about my stillness. She was wrong about my silence. And soon enough, she would learn the truth. Ben didn't ask any questions on the drive. He just let the sound of the road do the talking while the streetlights went by in blurry yellow bands. I held the folder tight against my chest, like a shield for something precious inside me. When he turned, he did it slowly. No hurry, no heroics, just the kind of calm I'd always admired when a man knows there's a real fire and decides to keep going anyway. Careful with that hip, he said when we pulled into his driveway. He said it the way older guys say nice things, flat, without any frills, just a fact, no pity. He came around to get my suitcase, but I kept my hand on the handle. I needed to feel its weight. Inside his house, it smelled like lemon cleaner and coffee that had been made hours ago. A lamp was on in the corner of the dining room. 2 mugs were already there, and a yellow legal pad was in the middle of the table, with a ballpoint pen balanced on top. The lamp made a soft light on the wood. He was ready for me. I realized he'd been ready before I even knew I was going to ask for help. We sat down. He let the silence sit there, too. He made room for it, and didn't try to get past it like it was something bad. I loosened the folder flap and spread the papers out with careful fingers. The bank statements, the printouts of charges that didn't belong to my life. The little glow of the deposit buried in there. A payment from the firefighters' union, mine and untouched. The notebook was the last thing I put down. When everything was on the table, I found my voice. She poured coffee on me. I said. The words sounded thinner when they weren't in the house they came from. Then she told me I had to either give her my card or be gone by sunset. Ben's jaw tightened once, Then he relaxed. He reached for a statement and slid his glasses down from the top of his head like a visor. The minute he started reading, his whole posture changed. The neighbor I used to drink beers with turned into the guy who had pulled 100 families out of financial fires. Not a hero, just a pro. How long has it been since you've seen any of this? He asked. Months, I said. Maybe longer. She made everything paperless. Said it was easier. He made a small sound in his throat, not quite a laugh. He tapped a line with the pen. $11.99 repeated on different dates. This is for a premium streaming service, he said. 3 of them piled on. You don't watch these. I watch the weather and a ball game when it's free, I said. He moved down the page. Electronics store, late-night food deliveries here. He circled a mess of charges that looked like a bunch of ants crawling up a hill. In-game purchases. This isn't a one-time thing. It's a habit. He wrote, Liam, next to it, not asking, but just making a note of the truth. He kept reading, and the only sound in the room for a while was paper rustling and the distant hum of the refrigerator. When he got to the deposit, he stopped and looked up. This transfer from the union, he said. She hasn't touched it. I don't think she knows it's there, I said. Or she didn't care because it wasn't as big as the pension. That's something, he said, and it didn't sound small when he said it. He pointed at the notebook. What's in there? My handwriting, I said. My accounts. On the last page. I wrote them down months ago. Forgot why. Remembered tonight. He opened it carefully, so he didn't break the spine, and turned to the last page. I watched the numbers go across his glasses. It felt like I was letting him read my diary, and all he found were numbers. Okay, he said after a minute, and the word felt solid. He put the notebook where the legal pad had been and pulled the pad closer. We're going to make a timeline. Charges by date. Notes about where you were, who had your bag, and who told you what. Every little thing. This isn't about getting revenge, George. This is about having proof. I'm done with yelling, I said. I want the papers to do the talking. He looked at me, maybe a little impressed, but he didn't say anything. Guys like us don't give each other awards. He clicked his pen and drew a line. Start with 9 months ago, he said. When did you first stop seeing statements? We went through it like guys cleaning out a basement after a flood. You pull a soggy box out, open it, and decide what to keep and what to throw away. One by one, we dated each charge, guessed when we had to, and filled in the blanks with what I remembered. The night she insisted on carrying my bag from the pharmacy. The afternoon she said the mailman must have put my mail in the wrong box. The week she told the bridge club I was too tired when what she meant was, I had my own friends, and that was a problem. At one point, he put his pen down and looked at me over his glasses. You didn't give her power of attorney, did you? No, I said. She talked about it, said it would help with medical forms, but I never signed. I remember Sarah's voice about things like that. Don't sign what you don't understand. I followed at least one rule in that house. He nodded. Something in his face changed. The way he was calculating things moved from one side to the other. Good, he said. Then whatever she's been doing it without the right paperwork. We kept at it. When my back started to hurt, I stood up and walked to the sink to rinse 2 mugs. He said, sit. The way we used to yell at the new guys when a roof looked like it might give way. I ignored him and ran the water anyway. Some habits aren't about being controlled, but about having some dignity. He smiled a little without moving his mouth and let me bring the mugs back to the table. We drank coffee that wasn't hot enough to hurt anyone, and the clock on the microwave ticked with green numbers toward midnight. Tomorrow, he said, we're walking into your bank together. We're going to ask to talk to a fraud specialist. We're bringing these. We'll be calm. We'll be specific. We'll ask to freeze the card and to review the last 9 months of charges. I nodded. Making a plan for the next day is a kind of prayer. Then he kept going. We're going to open a new account. Different bank, not a big fancy one, a credit union. We're moving that union money somewhere she can't get to it. We're going to change your online passwords. New email. 2-step verification tied to your phone, not a shared device. She set up my email, I said. I don't even know if it's mine. He reached for the laptop. Let's find out. We logged into my old account, and it took us 5 tries and a password reset through a phone number that was still mine. When the inbox opened, the first thing I felt was shame. A bunch of unopened messages, months of them piled up like snow. He scanned, then clicked a little gear symbol and leaned back so I could see what he saw. A forwarding rule. Every email with the words statement or bank in the title had been automatically sent to another address. Hers. He didn't curse. He just let out a breath. That's not going to look good for her if anyone asks, he said. He clicked disable with a single, calm tap, then printed the page that showed the rule and the date it was made. Proof isn't an argument. It's a timestamp. We checked the inbox for more rules, more little tricks. There was another one, a filter that put my friend's messages in a folder called Archived Health. He clicked through messages from guys I had fought fires with, photos of my grandkids who belonged to people I cared about, cookout invitations I never saw. I kept reading until the words got blurry. It's a different kind of stealing, not with money. We printed that out, too. There was a soft thud in the house, a neighbor's door, or maybe just the old pipe settling, and we both looked up, then laughed quietly at how on edge we were. Back to work. Utilities, Ben said. Where do those get paid from? We grabbed another statement and looked at the charges. Electricity, gas, and internet. Most of them on automatic payment to the address where Chloe lived. My money was paying for her lights, for the heat in the room where a coffee mug was sitting on the counter, for the internet router that her son used for his gaming live streams, all paid for with money I earned. I never asked you to pay my bills, I said, and the words sounded dumb as soon as I said them, like a little kid saying he didn't eat the cookies, even with crumbs all over his face. You didn't have to ask, Ben said. She made it so you couldn't. He picked up his phone. I'm calling someone. Who? A lady at the county's senior protection unit, he said. Nah. She doesn't wear a badge, but when she shows up, bank managers start acting right. He stepped into the hallway so his voice wouldn't mess up mine. I sipped my coffee and listened to the low talking. He came back with a pen behind his ear. She'll meet us at the bank, he said. Says you're not the first. Says it helps to have someone with a little authority. You think they'll believe me? I asked, and I was surprised by the question myself. It sounded like something a kid would ask, too. They'll believe the paper, he said. And they'll believe the guy who brought it in without smelling like smoke. We worked until the lamp looked like a bright spot in the dark, like a ship on black water. At one point, he brought out a wooden box and opened it. Inside were proper forms, letters to cancel things, a template for a legal document about disputed charges, and a checklist written in his neat handwriting. I saw now he had been doing this for other people, quietly, like you'd help a neighbor change a flat tire in their driveway. He slid the cancellation template over to me. This is for any permission they say you gave them, he said. We fill it out. We attach the statement about control, the email rules, and the timeline. We're not pointing fingers, we're just describing what happened. I wrote. The pen felt heavy, the yellow paper was very, very yellow. I did not authorize. It's a strange thing to write down that you're innocent, like it's a grocery list. It felt both important and dumb and absolutely necessary. By the second page, my hand was steady. By the third, my handwriting was straight. Sometimes your attitude is a choice you make while sitting at a kitchen table. When he reached for the deed to my house, I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. I don't know where the original is, I said. Chloe moved most of the file cabinet after my surgery. Said she was organizing. She might have thought my papers were her papers. He just nodded again. Another problem solved. I can get a copy from the county records office in the morning, he said. We'll see what it says. What do you remember? Did you ever sign a quitclaim? No, I said. Or add her to the title for hospital papers? No. I remembered the conversations. The way she'd bring up the idea gently, like a feather, never quite putting it right in my hand. I heard Sarah again. Don't sign what you don't understand. Maybe it was the one time I actually listened to her, and it saved me. Then I'm guessing you're still the only owner, he said. Which means she's been living there on your goodwill. That matters, George. I let out a long breath that made something in my chest feel softer. The house wasn't just wood and roof shingles. It was Sarah's laugh in the backyard. The pencil marks on the pantry door where Chloe's height was marked. It was my name printed in black on white somewhere in a county drawer. It was something I thought was gone forever. Tomorrow, he said again, this time a little softer. Bank first, records office second, credit union third, and the post office. I added the words before I even knew why. He tilted his head. I think she had some of my mail sent somewhere else, I said. I can't prove it, but I don't remember the last time I held an envelope with my name on it. I'd like to hold one again. He wrote it down without saying a word. At 2 o'clock in the morning, The kettle whistled as if to remind us that even quiet fights deserve a cup of tea. He poured, I signed. We scanned what we could with the app on his phone. The little blue line crawled like a rescue rope up a wall. Once or twice, my eyes burned. Not from what was spilled on me earlier, but from what I could finally see. He pretended not to notice. That's a kind of kindness men can show each other. Get some sleep, he said after 3. I set up the guest room down the hall. The sheets are clean. The door locks from the inside. It wasn't lost on either of us that he said it like a safety feature, not a friendly welcome. My knees started to complain as I stood up, and I carried myself to the doorway. He put a hand on my arm. It wasn't a grab, just a touch you give to someone who has just gone through something tough. We'll let the paperwork do the talking, he said. In the guest room, the window looked out at a maple tree. The leaves moved like a whisper. I lay on the bed and kept my clothes on. The old firefighter in me always wants to be ready to go. Not because I expect a fire, but because the habit makes me feel better. The burn on my thighs stung when I moved, but the pain felt like a result of something, not a punishment. At some point, I fell asleep. When I woke up, it was still dark enough to pretend morning hadn't started yet. By 7, we were at the bank. It was a small branch on Main Street where the tellers still know you if you wear the same hat twice. The manager took us into his office when Ben showed him the badge he doesn't actually have, but somehow always wears, a confident attitude, a pile of organized papers, and a voice that says, "We're not here to cause problems. We're here to fix them." Na from the county showed up 10 minutes later, introduced herself with a firm handshake and a smile that didn't try to say everything was okay. She had her own folder, heavier than ours, and a way of sitting that took up exactly the right amount of space. We explained everything. No drama, just dates and amounts, and a copy of an email rule with a date stamp on top, like a government seal. The manager's tie was too tight, and he loosened it without even noticing as he read. "Let's put a hold on everything," he said. "Eventually, we'll also give you a new debit card for your pension account and cancel the old one. I can flag these 9 months of charges and send them up to be reviewed as potentially unauthorized. Some will be harder to fight than others," he added honestly. "But this pattern, this pattern speaks for itself." Na's pen moved quickly as he spoke. "I'll file a senior financial exploitation notice," she said. And even the word senior didn't hurt because of how she said it, like a group that deserved to be protected. It doesn't automatically start a criminal case, Mr. Hill, but it creates a record. It also makes banks and stores take your claim more seriously. Would you be willing to give a short statement? "Yes," I said. The word surprised me by how easily it came out. We did it at the little round table, my voice steady, while she wrote, stopping to read things back to me to make sure they were my words. I did not authorize. I did not receive. My daughter set up. Words I never thought I'd have to say about my own family. But saying them felt less like a betrayal and more like taking out a splinter. The pain was already there. The tool just pulled it out into the light. When we were done, Na slid a card across to me. "If she shows up here," she said, tapping the card, "or at your house, or at your friend's house, and you feel pressured or unsafe, call. You don't have to make a scene. Just don't keep it a secret." I nodded and put the card in my wallet that I still owned because she hadn't been able to take it out of my pocket last week when she insisted on carrying my bag for me. The credit union was next. It was quieter there, humming like a library. The woman at the desk looked about the same age Chloe had been when she graduated. Her name tag said Clarissa in cheerful letters. She smiled at me the way a person smiles at a person, not a problem. We opened a new account. I used the union money to start it. We set a password no one but me would know and a security question only Sarah and I would understand the answer to. Two-step verification went to my phone, and I watched the little code show up on the screen like a small boat pulling into a safe harbor. We left with a new debit card and the feeling that a door had been closed behind us on purpose this time, not by someone else. At the county records office, Ben asked for a copy of my deed with a politeness that left no room for arguing. The clerk went through a stack, typed something on a keyboard with fingers that had done this 1,000 times, and came back with a piece of paper that made me catch my breath. Sole owner. George Hill recorded the month Sarah, and I signed it 28 years ago. No transfers, no changes, no daughter's name sneaking into the ink like a weed through a crack in the pavement. Ben didn't grin. He's not the kind of guy who grins at someone else's relief, but he did say, "That's clear." and put the paper in the folder like a man putting a good tool back in his toolbox. We stopped for coffee in the afternoon, hot but not burning, and a sandwich we barely tasted. It wasn't a party. It was just to keep us going. On the way back to his house, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't know. I almost ignored it. Then I read the first line. USPS change of address confirmation. Your mail has been sent to P.O. Box, followed by a number I'd never seen. The date was 3 months ago. Started online. It gave me a link to manage my mail forwarding under Authorized by. My name was there. It wasn't my confirmation email. I handed the phone to Ben, who read it, and then passed it to Na when she met us back at the dining table to finish the paperwork. Na didn't make a face. She didn't have to. She just added the screenshot to the pile with a neat clip. This kind of thing, she said, doesn't look like caring when a prosecutor lays it on a table. We're not calling the police today, I said, more to myself than to her. It wasn't fear. It was a line I was drawing. We're just getting things on paper. Exactly, Na said. You're building walls. You don't have to live in the house yet, but it's being built. The day ended the way some fires do, not with a victory dance, not with a clean wind, but with the quiet hiss of wet ash. Ben's lamp was glowing. The folder was heavy from our work. On the legal pad, he drew a short list for tomorrow. Talk to the bank's fraud investigator, cancel the mail forwarding, update Social Security with a new mailing address, his for now, and schedule an appointment with his friend who handles simple trusts, the kind that settle things down before they get messy. I sat back and listened to the house breathe. Somewhere outside, a dog barked and stopped. The maple tree rustled its leaves again. I looked down at my hands, old man's hands, with veins and spots, and felt no shame in them. They had pulled men out of rooms they thought they were going to die in. I could pull myself out, too. I'm not calling her, I said, almost to the wood on the table. I'm not going to explain it the way I've always explained things. Ben tore the sheet from the pad and handed it to me. You don't have to, he said. It's all explained right here. He clicked off the lamp, and the room had a soft darkness that wasn't scary. I held the folder to my chest and felt the quiet settle on me like a blanket Sarah used to put over my knees when I fell asleep on the couch. For the first time in months, I wanted to sleep, not to get away from the day, but to be ready for the next one. When the phone vibrated again on the table, I almost didn't pick it up. Then I saw the message preview. Appointment confirmed, property assessment, with a time for 2 afternoons from now. Not requested by me. Requested by a household manager, using my email, the same email that had been sending my bank statements to a hidden folder. The address was my house. I put the phone face down and let the silence do its job. Ben watched me. Now watch me. No one said, call her. No one said, go storm over there. No one said anything at all. I was the one who finally spoke, and my voice didn't shake. Let the paperwork answer, I said. It felt less like giving up and more like a lever being pulled. Somewhere back at that other kitchen table, steam from a careless cup was still in the air. Here on this one, the air was clear. Tomorrow, we have work to do. Tonight, I locked the guest room door from the inside, not because I was afraid of who might come in, but because I finally had something worth protecting. I woke up to the sound of a lawnmower somewhere down the street and the low talking of Ben on the phone in the kitchen. For a few seconds, I didn't know where I was. The sheets were too clean. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, and the ceiling didn't have the water stain I'd been planning to paint over for 7 years. Then the night came back to me. The statements spread out on Ben's table like maps, the forwarding rule with a date stamp that didn't belong to me, the county deed with my name alone on it. It wasn't a dream. The paper was real. I sat up slowly, waiting for the pain in my hip to announce itself. It did, but quieter than usual, as if something inside had stopped fighting me and decided to work with me for once. I got dressed, kept the same shirt I'd worn yesterday, with the coffee smell and all, and stepped down the hall. Ben stood by the sink with the phone to his ear and a pencil tucked behind his ear, listening the way he does, with his eyes narrowed, his chin down, not interrupting. He ended the call with a simple, understood, put the phone down, and looked at me like he was checking my pulse. You slept, he asked. Some, I said. Enough. He nodded toward the table. We've got appointments lined up. Na set up a meeting with a fraud investigator at the bank for this afternoon. The records office emailed a certified copy of the deed, and I talked to Clarissa at the credit union. She flagged 2 failed login attempts to your new account early this morning from a device we don't know. Nothing got through, I said. Already, he said. That's what people do when their water gets turned off. They bang the pipes. I poured coffee and drank it black. I didn't trust milk just then, not even the kind sitting innocently in Ben's refrigerator. The mug warmed my hands, and for a few seconds, the heat was just heat, not a painful memory. He slid a page across the table, his handwriting neat and firm. A list. Post office first, he said. We'll reverse the forwarding and get you a P.O. box they can't get to. After that, I want you to meet someone. Who? Frank, he said. He used to pull ladders with you. Went into real estate after his knee told him to stop being a hero. Knows title companies, knows property, and knows how to keep his mouth shut. You need a friend who speaks houses. I'd lost count of how many times I'd dragged Frank out of smoky rooms, and how many times he'd pulled me out. The thought of him made something warm stir under the coffee. And one more, Ben added. A lawyer you can trust. Elena Park. She's not flashy. She puts a solid foundation around things without making a lot of noise. Does this feel like we're doing too much? I asked. Doing too much is for fires, he said. This is a slow chill. You need insulation. We walked out into a sky that was the color of fresh paper. The maple tree in front of his house was shaking its leaves, shedding from last night. The world looked normal enough that if I was the kind of man who liked to pretend, I could have. I wasn't that kind of man anymore. The post office was already busy. A toddler was dragging a cardboard tube on a string. A man in a bright yellow vest was holding 5 slips that told him all the things he had missed. We stood in line and watched the clerk handle a bunch of problems at once with the patience of a saint who had given up on being canonized. When it was our turn, Ben took a step back and let me speak. I need to cancel a change of address, I said. It wasn't authorized by me. The clerk, with gray hair and a bun and glasses on a chain, looked at me over the rims like she'd heard that sentence 100 times and still didn't like the sound of it. Do you have ID? She asked. I handed her my driver's license, and she typed. The screen lit her face blue and made her lips look colder than they were. Forwarding started online, she said, 3 months ago. Verified through email. Not my email, I said. She didn't argue. She printed a copy, with the details clear and simple. Date, time, the P.O. box number. I'd never seen the authorized box checked next to my name. She slid the paper toward me, and a piece of me felt like it was sliding back into place. I wasn't imagining things. Someone had moved my mail through a website and was counting on me not to look behind the curtain. We'll file a reversal, she said. It might take a week to fix everything. Do you want your box here? Yes, I said. A small one. A small one is just as private as a big one, she said. And I liked her right away for not trying to sell me dignity. She walked me through the form and watched me write my name. When I handed the pen back, she looked not at me, but at the name on the form, as if acknowledging a person is a way to fix a wrong. Check this every other day, she said. Not because it'll be full, but because it's yours. We left with a key to box 137. I turned it in my hand like a coin before putting it into the wallet that kept refusing to leave me. Frank was at the diner on Brookside Street before we were. He was easy to spot, broad shoulders that had gotten a little wider, a firehouse ball cap that was faded, and hands like shovels resting around a coffee mug. He stood up when he saw me, grinned without showing his teeth, and hugged me once, hard, like you do when the guy in your arms is still here. And that's not a small thing. Jesus, George, he said, stepping back to look me over, his eyes checking for bruises and my posture for any sign of giving up, the old check. You okay? I've been worse, I said. I've been better. He nodded like the answer was good enough. We sat down. The waitress called him Han and brought a second mug without him asking. He listened while Ben told the story in clean lines, no extra details, like he was laying a hose straight down a hallway so he wouldn't trip over it later. Frank's hands never left the mug. When Ben finished, he let out a breath and stared a hole in the table. She poured coffee on you, he said. She did, I said. He shook his head once, a little refusal of how the world works, then set the refusal aside. All right, he said to the wood on the table. Then we'll just build you a different kitchen. He's a guy who has learned to turn anger into action. He reached into his jacket and slid a business card across the menu. Carla Meeks. It said in small letters, no shiny gold foil, The kind of card that stays in a wallet because it's earned its spot. She's quiet, he said. Knows how to figure out a house's value without making a big deal out of it. She'll do a quiet walkthrough, look at similar sales, and talk to a title officer I trust. If you want to sell, she'll list it. If you want to keep it and lock it up, she'll tell you how. If you want to put it in a trust, she'll hold her breath until the papers are signed. Tell her to schedule it. I said that I already had someone schedule an appraisal at my place this morning. Frank's eyebrows went up under the brim of his hat. Let me guess, not you, not me. Nope. Then they're either trying to get a new loan or figure out a price for a sale they think you'll never know about. He grabbed a napkin, pulled a pen from behind his ear, and wrote 2 words, chain of custody. He underlined them twice. Everything you approve for that house goes through someone who can spell those, too. You don't meet any service people at that house by yourself. The appraiser who comes for you has your paperwork, not theirs. The waitress slid plates we didn't ask for in front of us. Eggs, toast, fruit that looked surprised to be there. We ate because we had to. Food is just fuel when you've got things to do. Between bites, Frank told a story about a widow whose nephew turned her place into an Airbnb without her even knowing what an app was. No arrests, no TV stings, just a restraining order and the locks getting changed. It ended with her porch light coming on at the right time and the woman sleeping through the night for the first time in a year. Quiet wins, he said. Good paper and good locks. After the diner, we drove to Elena Park's office. Her building looked like every other low-brick building that holds small businesses and secrets. Her lobby had a plant that was either very healthy or very fake, and a row of chairs that suggested no one was supposed to stay long. She stepped into the doorway right on time and said my name like a neighbor calling you in from the yard. Mr. Hill, she said, offering a hand. I'm sorry we're meeting like this. I've had worse fires, I said. And better coffee. She smiled at that without the pity I've always hated. We sat at her conference table, and I laid out the folder. She put on her reading glasses and took each piece of paper with both hands, the way you take a fragile plate from a shelf. When she was done, she took the glasses off and set them on the closed file. This is a common story, she said. But this is a particularly clear one. You still own the house. There's no power of attorney. You have clear proof of control methods, email forwarding and mail forwarding, that were put in place without you knowing. And you have a pattern of financial abuse that doesn't reduce your rights. It makes you more believable. I nodded like I understood every word because most of them were English. What do we do? I asked. We create an irrevocable trust, she said, drawing a small box on a legal pad. She wrote my name inside the box. The house goes in. The pension accounts you still control can go in later. You are the owner and the one who benefits. We appoint a trustee, someone other than you, to hold the pen so you can't be pushed around. That person can be Ben or a bank or a lawyer, but I prefer someone who will return your calls after dinner. Ben, I said. Ben didn't even flinch. He just said, happy to be boring. And Elena smiled with her eyes. We'll also write a no-contact letter, Elena continued. Not blaming anyone, just stating the facts. As of this date, Ms. Andrews is no longer allowed to deal with or get to property or accounts that belong to Mr. Hill. It sounds boring, but boring is what you want. It leaves no room for an argument. I don't want to humiliate her, I said, and I was surprised by how true that still was. I just want her to stop. This way tends to do both without a big scene, Elena said. If the police need to get involved later, this creates a clear sequence of events. If they don't, this usually ends it. We went through the trust form, one part at a time. My name in boxes, the house's legal description, the trustee's name. Elena wrote in the record's number and the property's coordinates. She called her notary in with a button on her desk. The notary arrived with a stamp and a neutral tone. I signed my name with a pen that wrote smoother than I expected. At the bottom of the page, George Hill looked like a man I knew again. Elena gave me copies and told me the original would be recorded within 48 hours. Once that's done, she said, any attempt to get a new loan or sell without the trustee will hit a wall. A polite one, but a wall. Thank you, I said, the words small and heavy. Don't thank me yet, she said. Thank the boring but powerful legal system. It's dull. That's what makes it so smart. We stepped back out into the afternoon light. The world had the same cars and the same birds and the same boys on bikes doing the same dumb tricks, but my chest felt different. The house was no longer a place Chloe controlled with her attitude and her schedules. It was a line on a recorded page that would soon be inside a box with my name and Ben's steady hand on the lid. Something inside me that had been holding its breath finally let it out. On the way back to Ben's, Frank called. "I've got Carla for 3 o'clock tomorrow at your place," he said. "She'll meet us there with a clipboard and a camera and no time for nonsense. I'll be with her. You'll stay on the sidewalk. If anyone asks, she's there at the owner's request." "Someone scheduled an appraisal already," I said. "We saw the text." "That's fine," he said. "Let their stranger write their number. We'll write ours on better paper." Back at Ben's table, Na was waiting with her own folder and a straight-back chair posture that said she only leaned in if a person earned it. She'd been to the bank while we were with Elena. A fraud investigator had started pulling store information behind the charges. She slid a printout across the table. Orders placed at 2 in the morning, deliveries to my address, signatures on a tablet I never touched. "Do you want to see the screenshots?" she asked. "No," I said before I could picture the screen that wasn't mine. "I want you to have them." "Already do," she said. "I've also put a hold on the mail forwarding and marked the change of address request as disputed. That puts it in a different category. Does it stop them?" I asked. "It slows them down," she said, "and it leaves evidence." She laid down a card with a direct line and a badge number from someone who actually wears one. "If Ms. Andrews shows up at the bank, they'll call me. If she comes to your friend's house, you call me. If she calls, you don't answer. If she leaves a message, don't delete it. Silence is a kind of statement. Let her words pile up where they belong." I thought of Chloe's voice in the kitchen, flat and rehearsed, and I could hear how quickly it would turn into a big show when she realized the door she'd been walking through had a lock on it now. I felt pity without needing to offer it to her. She could keep it. I was busy. Night came, and with it a tiredness that wasn't defeat, but a way for my body to say, "You did some work today." Ben cooked eggs again and burned the toast. I ate it without complaining. We watched the local news with the volume low and turned it off before the weather report because I already knew what tomorrow would bring. A cold front was moving in from the west, and a small storm was coming to Brookside. I slept a different kind of sleep. No flinching, no listening for footsteps in the hall. When the sun came through the blinds in thin stripes, I felt it on my arms and thought, this is what a morning feels like when you own it. At 2:50 the next afternoon, we parked on the street outside my house. The grass looked cut because my money had paid for the man who cut it. The curtain was open because control likes to be seen. A white car was in the driveway with a logo on the door, appraisals and inspections. A man with a tablet got out and checked his watch like people do when they think their time is more important than yours. Frank's truck pulled in behind us. He got out with a clipboard and a badge that wasn't a badge, just a plastic card with his name and a license number that meant he was allowed to have opinions about houses for money. Carla got out of the passenger side, a woman in her 40s with a camera around her neck and a calm face that looked like it had no time for drama. "You must be Mr. Hill," she said on the sidewalk, holding out a hand and taking mine like it was a document we were both signing. "We'll be quick and professional. You don't need to go inside. Frank will go in if he has to. My report is separate from anything they say to you." The other appraiser came up with the easy arrogance of someone who expects to be waved right in. He smiled the way you smile at a confused passenger on the wrong plane. "Hi there," he said. "We have an appraisal scheduled for this address." Carla turned her body just enough to block his path to the front door. "And we have one scheduled by the owner," she said. "We're doing ours now." His smile got smaller. "I'll just need to get in." "From whom?" Carla asked. "From the household manager," he said, and looked at me and then at the house as if permission might grow on a bush. "The owner is here," Carla said, still not raising her voice. "And he hasn't asked you in." "Look," he tried again. "I have a schedule." "You have a schedule," Frank finished for him, friendly as a church usher. "But what you need is permission. You don't have it. If you'd like to talk to my client's lawyer, you can call this number." He handed over Elena's card like a mint for bad breath. The man stood there for a second longer than he needed to, then gave a tight nod and walked back to his car. He sat there for a full minute, typed something into the tablet, and drove away without looking up. Sometimes things just happen the way they're supposed to. Chloe's car wasn't in the driveway. For a moment, I was thankful for something I never thought I'd be thankful for, her not being there. No big scene, no yelling, no show on the front lawn where I'd taught her to ride a bike. Carla worked. Frank measured. I stood on the sidewalk with Ben, who didn't say anything because he didn't need to. The house looked different from out here. The lines were the same, the paint the same tired color, but something about the way the sun hit the windows had changed. Maybe it was just me seeing it. Maybe it was the box Elena had drawn on paper with my name inside it. On the way back to Ben's, my phone buzzed. A voicemail icon. I didn't press play. I just let it be what it was, a message, not an order. We sat around the table again. Carla sent her first notes. Solid structure, old roof, kitchen update done badly, and comparable sales that told a story the way numbers do when someone asks them nicely. You'll get the official report tomorrow, she said. Don't be surprised if their attempt causes a call from a lender. If it does, don't talk to them. Send them to your lawyer. I'm learning all kinds of new ways to say no without actually saying no, I said. That's good estate planning, she said. It's a long, polite no. We made one call before dinner to the locksmith Frank trusted. He'd meet us in the morning with my permission and Ben standing next to him to change the locks that had been turned so often by other hands they'd forgotten mine. Elena texted a photo of the recorded trust filing. The document number glowed like a small light on a dark map. I walked out onto Ben's porch and watched the maple tree turn air into a dance. I thought of Chloe as a little girl running through a sprinkler, giggling, the sun catching in her hair. The way her cheeks would get red when she wore herself out and fell into my lap with no plan but to be held. The memory didn't hurt me the way it had in the last year. It just sat next to me, like a friend who knows when to be quiet. Behind me, I heard the sound of Ben's chair scraping on the hardwood floor, the clink of dishes going into the sink. Na's voice floated low from the dining room. She was on the phone with someone who would put a note in a system so a future door would need a different key. A text shook my phone. Unknown number. You can't be serious. This is cruel. No name, no question mark. Underneath it, a second one. We'll talk tomorrow. I didn't type anything. I put the phone face down on the porch rail and let the wood take its weight. Being quiet doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're careful. It means the plan gets to breathe. Inside the house, it smelled like pepper and dish soap and something else. Something clean that had nothing to do with lemon cleaner. It smelled like a life put back on its own feet. I went in, closed the door, and turned the deadbolt with my hand. The click was small. The sound it made in my head was not. The morning after that meeting with the lawyer, I woke up early. They'd shuffled cash through accounts under my name, thinking I'd never catch on. It was a pile of fraud so big it could bury him if it ever hit a courtroom. I didn't slam the folder shut, didn't let pure rage take the wheel. Instead, I laid everything out on the table, smoothing the papers with a calm hand. Every line, every fake signature wasn't just proof of their backstabbing anymore. It was my poker hand. At 9 sharp, I walked back to the lawyer's office, folder tucked under my arm like a soldier carrying orders. "Mornin', John," he said when I came in, then waved me to a seat. "I've gone through everything," I said, sliding the folder across his desk. "I want to move forward, but not straight to court just yet. I want to set the stage." He leaned back, putting his hands together. "You mean you want to let them think they're still running the show?" A little smile played on my lips. "Exactly. Let him think I'm down and out. Then remind him whose name is still on everything they've touched." He let out a soft chuckle. "You got patience. That'll cut him deeper than any thin." I didn't say a word. My silence said it all. Later that afternoon, Chloe called. First time I'd seen her name on my phone since she tossed me out. For a second, I thought about just letting it ring, letting her wonder why she suddenly needed me. But then I hit accept. "Dad," she said, her voice sugary but brittle, like cheap paint. I could hear Evan's voice in the background, whining about some game. And Ben's voice, too, sharp as a tack, telling him to pipe down. Their house was never quiet like that when I lived there. Always some kind of tension humming under the walls. "I'm fine," I said, keeping my voice level. "The apartment's small, but it's mine." "That's good," she said. A pause. "Listen, about the credit card. Evan's tuition, his expenses. It's been rough, you know?" There it was. Not even a full minute of small talk before she got to the money. "Chloe," I said softly, "you dumped coffee on me in your kitchen, called me a pain, and told me to get lost. You wiped me out. And now you're calling about money. What exactly do you think I am?" Silence. Then a sharp gasp of air. "You're my father. Don't twist this. Families help each other. That's what you always taught me." I almost laughed out loud, but it came out as a dry puff of air. Families don't fake each other's names, Chloe. The silence on the other end turned to stone. I'd tossed a pebble into a still pond, and the ripples would take a while to reach the shore, but I knew it had hit. I don't know what you're talking about, she finally said, her voice stiff. I think you do, I said, and then I hung up before she could start making up more lies. That night, I looked through old photos, not to feel sorry for myself, but to sharpen my memory. Chloe at 12 with her first softball glove. Chloe at 16 driving the beat-up car I'd worked my tail off to buy her. Chloe in her graduation gown, arms around me, smiling like I was the center of her universe. And then Chloe now, the same hands that once held onto my shoulders, now dumping a mug of scorching hot coffee in my lap. I laid the pictures out on my desk, past and present, right next to each other. Then I slid the old ones back in the drawer. The girl in those photos wasn't there anymore. The woman standing in my kitchen, arms crossed, voice flat, was somebody else entirely, and that woman was about to find out what it means to mess with me. The next week, I went to Evan's school play. Not 'cause I wanted to cheer for him, I'll be honest. I didn't. But 'cause how things looking is important. I sat in the second row, all by myself. Chloe saw me when she and Ben walked in. Her eyes got big for a second, then narrowed. She hadn't expected me. During the break, she came up, a fake smile stretched across her face. Dad, didn't expect you. I wouldn't miss my grandson's show, I said calmly. Ben was standing right next to her, stiff, his eyes bouncing back and forth to me like I was a spot he couldn't get clean. You're making things harder than they need to be, he mumbled under his breath. I leaned in closer, my voice low and steady. Nah, Ben. You did that yourself, when you thought no one would notice the papers you signed with my name. He froze, his jaw tightening. For a second, I saw a real fear flash in his eyes, but then he covered it up with a smug look. You got no proof. I almost laughed. Oh yeah? We'll see. Chloe's hand shot out and grabbed his arm, her smile cracking just enough to show she was scared. They got away fast, going back into the crowd. I stayed put, watching, patient as ever. Back at the apartment, I wrote in a notebook. Every time they betrayed me, every word, every fake signature, every slight. I put the date on each one, wrote down every fact. Not 'cause I'd forget, but 'cause a memory without a record can just be called bitterness. With a record, memory turns into proof. Some nights I sat awake, listening to the city outside my window. Cars humming, dogs barking, neighbors arguing. It brought me back to nights on watch in the Navy. Silence stretching out, my eyes scanning the dark water. Danger never came when you expected it. You had to be still, ready, patient. And so I waited. I let Chloe and Ben sweat. Let him worry about what I knew, what I didn't. Let their fear eat at their sleep. One night, the phone rang again. Chloe, this time, her voice sharper, almost crazy. Dad, we need to talk about the house. I didn't say anything, just listened. They told us the bank said something about problems. We could lose everything if you keep pushing this. There it was. Fear in her voice finally. Chloe, I said, letting her name hang heavy in the air. You once told me I was a pain. Do pains in the butt carry houses on their backs for their kids? Do pains in the butt pay for tuition and groceries and keep roofs from falling down? She sniffled, but I didn't soften. You told me to get out of your house. Fine. But get this, I won't be erased. Not legally, not financially, not as your father. You think being disrespectful is cheap. You'll see what it really costs. And before she could answer, I hung up again. That night, as I turned off the lights, I felt a calm settle over me. This wasn't about getting revenge in a big movie way. No fireworks, no yelling. This was quieter, sharper. The kind of justice that shows up like a cold snap, slow, steady, and you can't deny it. And deep down, I knew Chloe and Ben hadn't even started to understand just how much their disrespect was going to cost them. The days after that last call from Chloe felt different, like the ground under her and Ben had started to crack, and I was the only one who could hear it. I just kept living my life as quietly as I could, making sure they didn't see what I was really getting ready for. I still went to the store in the mornings, nodding at the same clerk who always asked if I wanted paper or plastic. I still sat on my balcony in the evenings with my notebook, writing down the little things that might matter later on. But under all that normal stuff, I felt like a man who'd set a trap in the woods and was just waiting for the rope to snap. A week later, a letter came in the mail. It was for me, but had the county court stamp on it. I opened it slow, half expecting another insult from the bank. Instead, it was a notice that they were starting to take back the house from Chloe and Ben. My name was still on the loan, which meant I got a copy too. My hands didn't shake as I read it. If anything, I felt a clear head I hadn't had in months. They thought faking my name and pushing me out would be the end of it. But the paper in my hands was proof that their big heads had pointed the gun right at themselves. That night, Chloe called again. This time, she didn't even try to pretend. "Dad, we need money. The bank's threatening to take the house. We'll lose everything. Please, you have to help us." I let the silence stretch. I could hear her breathing real shallow. Hear Evan in the background playing a video game like the whole world wasn't coming apart. I finally said, "You threw me out of that house. You dumped coffee on me and told me I was a pain. Why would you think I'd do anything to save it now?" Her voice got high and shaky, desperate. "Because you're my father, you're supposed to care." That word "supposed" hung in the air like a noose. "No, Chloe. A father cares when he's treated like one. You've treated me like a bank, like a credit card that breathes. And now you want me to clean up a mess you made with lies and faking papers. Do you even hear yourself?" There was no answer, just her crying quietly before the line went dead. The next day, Ben showed up at my apartment. He knocked hard, like a guy who wants to scare you, forgetting that the person inside has seen worse storms. I opened the door slow. He stood there, shoulders squared, wearing a clean shirt like he was still trying to look like he was in charge. "We need to talk," he said. I stepped to the side and let him in. He didn't sit, just walked around my small living room, his shoes creaking on the old wood. "Look, I don't know what you think you got on us, but if this foreclosure happens, we'll all be broke. Your name's on that loan, too. You'll lose everything." I leaned back in the chair, crossing my arms. "The difference, Ben, is that I didn't fake anyone's name. The court will see that. You'll be the one getting questioned, not me." His face got dark. "You wouldn't put your daughter through that. Through court, through a scandal." I stared at him, my voice steady. "You already put her there when you told her this was a smart idea. You think I don't know who pushed the papers, who whispered in her ear about easy money. You've always looked at me like I'm weak. But let me tell you something, Ben. Weak men don't make it through war. Weak men don't raise daughters all alone for years while their wives are dying in a hospital bed. Weak men don't sit quiet when they're wiped out. I've waited long enough." For the first time, he flinched. His brave act cracked just a little. "If you go through with this, you'll tear the family apart." I almost laughed. "Ben, you already did." He left without another word, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. But I saw something before he walked out, the sweat on his collar. The way his hand shook as he reached for the doorknob. He was scared, and fear makes people sloppy. 2 days later, I got another call, but this time not from Chloe or Ben. It was from Evan's school principal. She asked if I could come in to talk about some behavior stuff. I said sure, even though my first thought was that Ben and Chloe had sent her to make me feel bad. When I got there, though, I figured out it was worse than that. Evan had been caught bragging to his friends that his parents were buying a new boat once they got rid of some old man problems. The words made my stomach turn. Kids just repeat what they hear at home. That meant Chloe and Ben were still pretending to him that everything was fine, that money was coming, that I was the thing getting in the way of their perfect life. I sat across from the principal, listening carefully. She looked uncomfortable, not sure how much she should say. "Mr. Miller, I just thought you should know. Evan seems confused. He talks about you like you're the reason his family is having a hard time. We don't like to see kids stuck in the middle of grown-up fights." I thanked her, keeping my voice calm, but inside I was burning. They were poisoning their own son against me. Not happy with just betraying me. They needed to change the story, so I was the bad guy in his eyes. I walked out of that school with my jaw tight and a heavy feeling in my chest. That was the moment I stopped hesitating. If they wanted to have a war of stories, I'd give him one backed up by the truth and a lot of evidence. That evening, I called my lawyer. "It's time," I said. "File the lawsuit. Fraud, faking papers, the whole list." He didn't even stop to think. "Got it. We'll move quick." The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork and court dates. Chloe stopped calling. Ben tried one more time, leaving a message full of threats, but I deleted it before it finished. I just let the law do its thing, each piece of paper another nail in the coffin they'd built for themselves. When the court day finally came, I put on my old Navy jacket, the one with the brass buttons, all shiny. I wanted the judge to see me not as some weak old man being taken advantage of, but as somebody who had lived through a lot of storms and wasn't going to be wiped out. Chloe and Ben sat at the other table, both looking smaller than I'd ever seen them. Chloe's eyes kept looking everywhere but at me. Ben's face was stiff, his jaw locked, but his hands were fidgeting like crazy, showing the nerves he couldn't hide. The judge looked at all the proof, the fake names, the money transfers, the lies. My lawyer laid everything out clean, each page a blade. Ben's lawyer sputtered objections, but none of it mattered. The truth was too heavy, too well documented. When the judge finally looked up, her words were sharp as glass. This court finds enough evidence of fraud and forgery. The blame rests with Mark Davis and, to a lesser degree, Karen Davis. They have to pay back the money. Foreclosure will continue with the correct papers. Chloe let out a soft gasp, covering her mouth. Ben's shoulders slumped. It was all over, and they knew it. Afterward, in the hallway, Chloe finally looked at me. Her eyes were red, her face pale. "Dad?" she whispered, almost like she used to when she was a little girl. "How could you do this?" I looked at her for a long time. "No, Chloe, how could you? I gave you everything. And when you had a choice, you gave me disrespect. This isn't me doing something to you. This is me not letting you wipe me out." She reached out like she was going to touch my arm, but I stepped back. There are some hurts a hand can't fix. She put her hand down, tears falling, and for the first time, I didn't feel bad. I felt the weight of justice. That night, I sat at my small kitchen table again, the same one where I had laid out the papers weeks before. Only now the papers were different, official court orders, the kind of proof no one could twist. Outside, the city kept going, lights glowing in windows, life moving forward. Inside, I finally breathed easier. The fight wasn't over. Disrespect never ends clean, but the first battle was mine. And as I leaned back, sipping my coffee, I thought about something Chloe had once said when she was a kid. She'd asked me why the Navy taught men to wait so long before they did anything. I had told her, because being patient wins wars. And patience had just won mine. When the courtroom quieted down, I thought silence would come back. I believed that after the judge's decision, after the foreclosure papers were signed and the truth was made law, Chloe and Ben would back off, feeling sorry for themselves, and learn to be a little less proud. But being arrogant has a way of surviving even after it's been cut down. It stays around in whispers and lies told when no one's listening, in the stories people tell themselves to fall asleep. And so the weeks after the trial didn't bring peace. They brought the slow breaking apart of everything they had tried to keep together. It started with Evan. He was only 15, stuck between being a kid and a grown-up, but kids figure out lies faster than grown-ups give him credit for. One evening, as I was locking my door, I saw him standing at the bottom of the stairs. He looked smaller than usual, his hoodie was too big, his sneakers were all scuffed up. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me like he was looking for a safe place. "Evan," I said gently, "what are you doing here?" He shifted, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Mom doesn't know I'm here." The words were heavy for a kid his age. I waved him up. Inside, I made tea, the only thing I could think of to offer. He sat at my table, shoulders hunched, eyes stuck on the wood grain. "They told me you ruined everything," he finally said. His voice cracked in the middle of the sentence. "That you wanted us to lose the house. That you hated Mom." I took a long breath before I answered. "And what do you believe, Evan?" His eyes flickered to mine, unsure. "I don't know anymore. I heard him talking. Dad yelling about money. Mom crying. But then I saw papers in her room. Court stuff. Your name wasn't on the bad parts. It was theirs. So why did they tell me it was you?" I felt a knot twist inside me. This boy, my grandson, was old enough to see through the lies, but still young enough to be hurt by being betrayed. "Because," I said softly, "sometimes when people are ashamed, they point the finger at somebody else. It's easier than facing the truth. They thought I'd be the easier bad guy." He swallowed hard, blinking fast. "I don't know who to believe anymore." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Believe what you see, not what anyone tells you." That's what I had to learn the hard way. Look at what people do, not what they say. If I hated your mom, would I have raised her? Paid her bills? Kept her safe when she was younger? If I wanted you to be miserable, would I have left her house when she told me to go instead of fighting to stay? He sat quietly for a long time. Then, almost in a whisper, he asked, "Do you hate her now?" That question hit harder than anything Chloe had ever thrown at me. I thought about it carefully. No, I don't hate her, but I don't trust her either. And that's worse in some ways. 'Cause love without trust is like a house with no foundation. It looks fine until the first storm comes. Evan stared at the floor again, nodding a little like he understood more than I expected. When he left, he gave me a weird hug, his skinny arms barely getting around my shoulders. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough to tell me things were changing. Not long after, I heard from the neighbors that Chloe and Ben had been fighting louder than ever. Arguments spilled out onto the front lawn with words sharp enough to draw blood without a knife. Ben accused her of being careless, of letting the courts tear him apart. Chloe yelled back that it was his idea all along, that she never wanted to fake papers until he convinced her it was the only way. Their perfect front was gone. In its place were two people tearing each other apart in front of everybody while the neighbors pulled their curtains tighter. Then came the day Evan showed up again. This time he wasn't alone. He had a backpack and his eyes were all puffy from crying. "I can't stay there tonight," he said simple. I stepped to the side and let him in. He dropped the backpack by the door and fell onto my couch, putting his face in his hands. It took a while, but eventually the words came out between sobs. "They keep saying it's your fault. But I heard him. I heard Dad yelling that you warned him, that you told him not to mess with the bank stuff. Mom screamed that you'd never forgive her. And then he said he wished you were dead already so you wouldn't be a problem anymore." His voice cracked, and my chest tightened with a pain I hadn't felt even in the courtroom. Being wiped out in your kid's eyes is one thing. To hear your own grandson repeat words of death from his parents is a different kind of wound entirely. I put a hand on Evan's shoulder. "You're safe here," I told him. "You don't have to take sides tonight. You can just rest." He nodded, curling up against the armrest. I brought him a blanket, the same one Chloe used as a child when the winters got too cold. Watching him there, I felt the mean joke of time, how history just keeps repeating itself in quiet ways if you let it. That night, as he slept, I sat awake in my chair. I thought about the long road that had led here, how a spilled cup of coffee had been the start of a war nobody would admit was happening. I thought about the silence after the promise I'd made to myself. And now I realized the promise wasn't just about getting justice for me. It was about breaking the cycle before it swallowed Evan whole. The next morning, Chloe came pounding on my door. Her hair was a mess, her eyes red from not sleeping. When I opened it, she pushed her way inside, seeing Evan right away. "What are you doing here?" she snapped, her voice all jagged. "Get your stuff. We're leaving." Evan sat up slow, holding the blanket tighter. "No, Mom. I don't want to go." Chloe turned on me, pure fury flashing in her eyes. "What did you tell him? What lies did you fill his head with?" I stood my ground. "Nothing he didn't already know. He heard you and Ben himself. He knows the truth now, Chloe. Stop blaming me for the cracks you made." Her face twisted with anger, then cracked with something closer to heartbreak. She put her hands to her head, mumbling under her breath. "This isn't how it was supposed to go. We were supposed to build something. Ben said you'd never fight us, that you'd just fade away." The words hurt, but not as much as they used to. "I won't fade, Chloe. Not for you. Not for anyone. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you can stop drowning in your contempt." Evan looked between us, his eyes wide, like he was watching two storms crash into each other. For a second, I thought Chloe might hit me. Her hands were clenched so tight her knuckles were white. But then all of a sudden she just broke. Her shoulders slumped. Her breath came in ragged gasps and she sank into the nearest chair. "I didn't want this," she whispered. "I just wanted to feel safe. Ben kept saying we could have more, that you owed us. I thought if we just had enough, everything would finally feel safe." Her confession hung in the air like smoke. Evan's eyes got softer, but mine stayed hard. "And did it work?" I asked quietly. She shook her head, tears falling now. "No, nothing feels safe anymore." There was nothing left to say. I let her cry. Let Evan sit frozen. Let the silence speak for me. Because in that silence, the truth was louder than anything I could have yelled. Disrespect always costs more than it pays. Chloe eventually stood up, wiping her face. She asked Evan one more time to come home. He said no. She didn't argue this time. She just nodded, defeated, and left without another word. When the door closed behind her, Evan looked at me. "Grandpa," he whispered, "what's going to happen now?" I sighed deep, putting a hand on his shoulder. Now they face what they created. And you, Evan, you learn from it. You don't let bitterness eat you alive the way it did them. You build something different. He nodded slowly, even though I knew he didn't really get how heavy those words were. But he would. Tom would teach him. And as I looked at him sitting there with the blanket still around his shoulders, I felt the tiniest flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The courthouse smelled like old wood and paper, kind of stale and serious, like every wall had soaked up decades of people failing and confessing. I sat in the audience, my hands resting on the cane. I didn't really need it, but I carried it anyway, more to remind myself of something than for help. Next to me, Evan sat stiffly, his thin fingers grabbed in the strap of his backpack. He had said he had to come. Chloe hadn't wanted him here, but for once I put my foot down and told her she didn't have a say. He was old enough to see the truth for himself, not through the filter of late-night yelling. Ben came in first, walking down the aisle like a guy who thought being charming could make numbers on a paper go away. His suit was ironed, his smile was sharp, but his eyes were jumping around like a gambler who'd already lost his last hand. Chloe followed, her shoulders tight, her eyes red. She didn't look at me, not even once. When the judge came in, everyone stood up. I watched Chloe's knees shake a little as she got up, and I wondered if she remembered all the times I had held her steady as a kid. The irony was sharp. I had raised her to stand tall, and now she was shaken under the weight of her own choices. The case was pretty simple in some ways, just papers and names. But the story those papers told was real bad. Fake documents, messed up accounts, and payments missed on purpose. Ben's lawyer tried to make me look like the bad guy, the stubborn old man who wouldn't help his daughter when she needed him the most. They said I had money, that I was hoarding it, that if I had just used my credit card like a father who cared would, none of this would have happened. My lawyer, a steady woman named Denise, got up without raising her voice. She just spread the papers out like pieces of a puzzle. She pointed to the names, showed how they were faked, and showed the timeline where I had been written out, not cause I said no, but cause Ben and Chloe had tried to go around me completely. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm. "What we see here is not a parent who didn't care. It's people who tried to use family ties to get what they wanted. My client wasn't asked for help. He was told. And when he wouldn't just give in, he was wiped out of his own daughter's life. What came after is not his fault. It's theirs." The judge looked at the papers with the patience of a man who had seen this show 100 times before. Still, when his gavel hit the wood, the sound was final enough to make the whole room jump. "Foreclosure will go ahead. The people being sued are responsible for the damages and legal fees. Mr. Mark Davis, Mrs. Karen Davis, your actions have consequences. This court will not protect you from them." The silence that followed was heavier than any yell. Karen slumped back into her chair, her face pale. Mark stood stiffly, jaw tight, like he still believed he could make the decision go away with his mind. Evan shifted next to me. I felt him look up. His young face was caught between winning and being sad. He had just watched his parents lose everything. And even though part of him must have felt like it was what they deserved, another part would always be sad about the mess they were in. Karen finally turned toward me. For the first time in months, her eyes met mine. They weren't full of anger this time. They were empty. "Dad?" she whispered so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. "Is this what you wanted?" The words hit me like a rock. I didn't answer right away. I let the question hang in the air, not because I was happy to see her suffer, but because I needed her to feel how heavy her choices were. Then slowly I shook my head. "No, Karen," I said. "What I wanted was for you to choose to be honest. What I wanted was for you to remember who raised you. What I wanted was to sit at your kitchen table, not in this courtroom. But you chose to look down on me. And looking down on people always comes with a price." Her lips shook, but she didn't speak again. Mark grabbed her arm, pulling her out of the room, his face set in a grim mask. I watched them go, not with happiness, not even with anger, just with the cold certainty that the promise I made myself the day the coffee spilled had finally come true. Evan and I left together. Outside, the autumn wind was sharp against our faces. He walked silently for a while, then finally asked, "Grandpa, what happens now?" I looked at him carefully. "Now your parents have to live with what they did. And you, Evan, you have to decide what kind of man you want to be." You've seen both sides now. You've seen what it costs to look down on someone. And you've seen what it takes to stick it out. The choice is yours. He nodded slowly, his face serious. For a 15-year-old boy, he carried himself with the seriousness of someone much older. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, going over the day in my head. The coffee, the yelling, the courtroom, it all swirled together like a storm finally breaking. But storms don't leave everything clean. They leave a mess, too. And I wondered what was left of Karen after all this. Days passed. Neighbors whispered about the Reynolds foreclosure, about how the perfect family had fallen apart. Some felt sorry for them. Others smirked from behind their blinds. I didn't join either side. Gossip doesn't fix what's broken. Karen didn't come to see me, not for weeks. I half expected her to disappear forever, swallowed by pride and shame. But one evening, just as the sun was setting, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, she stood there. No makeup, no sharp words, no planned lines. Just my daughter, small, tired, and exposed. "Dad," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know where else to go. Something in me broke then. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a feeling of understanding. Because underneath all the lies and disrespect, she was still the girl I had once carried on my shoulders. The girl who had once run to me when nightmares kept her awake. "Come in," I said. She stepped inside, her eyes looking over the familiar walls as if she was afraid they might judge her, too. For a long time, we just stood there in silence. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry." The words weren't enough to erase the past, but they were a start. Evan joined us at the table. He didn't say much, but his presence made the moment feel real. We weren't a fixed family. Not yet. But we were no longer a family at war. Later, after Karen left, Evan stayed behind. He looked at me with eyes that held both pain and thanks. "You didn't give up on her," he said softly. I shook my head. "No, Evan, I didn't. But I also didn't let her destroy me. That's the balance you have to learn. Love doesn't mean you give up. It means knowing when to stand firm and when to open the door again." He nodded, and I knew he understood more than his age should have allowed. As I sat there watching the night get darker outside my window, I realized the promise I had been carrying in my chest since that first burn had finally come full circle. It wasn't just about making Karen pay. It was about teaching her and Evan that disrespect has a cost too high for any family to afford. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. After that night, the house felt different. Not because anything had changed in the room, but because the silence wasn't so heavy anymore. It was no longer the silence of being erased. It was the silence of a chance, fragile and uncertain, but real. Karen had walked back into my life, not as the daughter who had burned me with coffee and disrespect, but as someone who was stripped bare, facing the results of her own choices. I didn't hurry to forgive her, but I also didn't turn her away. Somewhere between those two extremes, a door had been left open a little. The days that followed had a strange rhythm. Karen stayed in a friend's extra room while she and Mark tried to put back together what was left of their lives. Mark got angrier every day, angry at the world, angry at me, angry at Karen for not being able to keep me in line. But Karen had changed since the court ruling. The sharp edge in her voice was gone, replaced by something else, something closer to understanding, maybe even some humility. She called me more often, sometimes just to ask how I was doing, sometimes to check if Evan was with me. The calls were short and awkward, but they were hers, and each one chipped away at the wall she had built between us. Evan, on the other hand, became my shadow. He stayed over more often, eating dinner at my table, helping me fix old things around the house, and even asking about my past. One evening, as we sanded a chair in the garage, he asked me a question so direct it almost broke me in two. "Grandpa," he said, brushing sawdust off his hands, "why didn't you just give them the card that night? Wouldn't it have been easier?" I put down the sandpaper and looked at him. His face had the raw honesty of youth, not yet touched by the full weight of giving in. "Because, Evan," I said carefully, "some things are more important than money. If I had given them that card, it wouldn't have been help. It would have been giving up. And once you give up to disrespect, it grows. They would have taken not just my money, but my dignity. And dignity, once it's gone, is harder to get back than any dollar." He nodded, thinking about it, and I knew he understood more than his words let on. Meanwhile, Mark's downfall got faster. His business partners left him after the court ruling. His name became linked with fraud around town. The man who once walked with pride now walked with his shoulders bent, his eyes darting around, as if everyone carried a mirror showing his failures. Karen held on to him less and less. Their arguments spilled into Evan's ears. And even though I never asked for details, I heard enough to know that small cracks were becoming big canyons. One Sunday afternoon, Karen showed up at my door again. Her hair was tied back. Her clothes were simple. She looked tired but not destroyed. She sat at the table, twisting her hands together, then finally spoke. "Dad," she said, her eyes locked on mine. "I'm leaving, Mark." I didn't flinch. Deep down, I had known this was coming. "Why now?" I asked. She let out a breath that seemed to let go of years of weight from her chest. "Because I finally realized he doesn't want a partner. He wants a shield, someone to blame. And I'm done being his excuse. I lost too much already. I won't lose Evan too." There it was. The truth spoken at last. For a moment, I just looked at her face. The same face I had known since she was a child. Underneath the lines of regret, I saw the girl who had once grabbed my hand at the fair, terrified of losing me in the crowd. She was still there, just buried. "What about Evan?" I asked, my voice steady. "He'll live with me. I want to build a new life with him." "But Dad, I can't do it alone. I don't want to shut you out anymore. I need you. He needs you." The words hurt deeper than any coffee burn ever had. I had waited months, years, even, to hear that. Still, part of me was unsure. Could I trust it? Could I trust her? I leaned forward, putting my hands on the table. "Karen," I said, "I'll be here for Evan, always, and for you, if you mean what you're saying, but I won't save you. Not again. You have to do the work yourself. You have to prove that looking down on me isn't what makes you who you are." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "I know," she whispered. "I will." That night, Evan stayed over. He ate with a good appetite, laughed at a story I told about Karen when she was his age. And for a brief moment, the air felt like family again. Not the broken, bitter family of the last year, but something closer to the old days, something whole. Mark, however, did not go away quietly. He stormed into my yard 2 weeks later, his suit a mess, his face crazy with anger. He yelled accusations, spit flying, his hands clenched. Evan stood at the window, his eyes wide, but I told him to stay put. I stepped outside. "You think you've won, don't you, old man?" Mark yelled, his voice rough. "You think you've taken everything from me." I stood tall, my cane in hand, my voice calm. "I didn't take anything from you, Mark. You threw it all away, and you used my daughter to do it." His chest heaved, his jaw working. For a moment, I thought he might hit me, but instead his shoulders slumped. He cursed under his breath, turned around, and stumbled down the street. I never saw him again after that, not in person. I heard he had skipped town, leaving debts behind like breadcrumbs. But I didn't go after him. That was no longer my fight. The months that followed were slow but steady. Karen moved into a small apartment across town, simple but warm. Evan did well. His grades got better, his laughter came back. And me, I found peace in the everyday things again. Cooking dinner for two, fixing the squeaky back door, reading late into the night without being afraid of being called to hand over what little I had left. One evening, as winter pressed against the windows, Karen joined me for dinner. She cleared her throat halfway through the meal and said, "Dad, I know I can't take back what I did. I know sorry isn't enough, but I need you to know I see it now. I see what my disrespect cost me, and I'm done paying that price." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in years, I believed her. I raised my glass of water and said, "Then here's to new beginnings." She smiled, tears in her eyes, and clinked her glass to mine. That night, after they left, I sat alone in the quiet house. The silence was still there, but it was no longer heavy. It was gentle, almost like a friend. I thought back to that day when the coffee burned my legs, when Karen's words cut deeper than the burn itself. I had promised myself then that disrespect would be paid for, and it had been. Not through revenge, not through tearing things down, but through a new understanding, by letting her see with her own eyes how expensive it had become. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a deep breath into the dim room. Life had not given me the family I once dreamed of, but it had given me something else, something harder, sharper, more lasting. A truth: you can't just hand over your dignity like a credit card. It has to be protected, even when it costs you everything else. And in that truth, I found peace.